You ever wonder how your favorite wrestlers became the superstars they are today? Well, the answer is kind of hidden in the secret history of handshakes, betrayals, and one man's absolutely relentless ambition. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on wrestling's secret empire, and we're going to show you how one guy burned it all to the ground.
Think about that for a second. A cartel. Before the huge global brands we know now, wrestling was this patchwork of local empires. Each one was ruled by its own promoter, and the whole thing was held together by a simple promise, a handshake. It was a world that seemed completely impenetrable, until one man decided to just shatter the whole thing.
So, to really get how this whole empire crumbled, we first have to understand how it was built. The National Wrestling Alliance, or the NWA, it wasn't just some company, it was a system, and for a long, long time, it was a brilliantly successful one.
Okay, try to imagine a world where every single town has its own world champion. That's what wrestling was like before 1948. It was the Wild West, a total chaotic mess that just confused fans and honestly it hurt business. But in all that chaos, a few powerful promoters saw a huge opportunity. They got together, led by this guy, Sam Wichnick, and they decided to create some order. They formed the National Wrestling Alliance, and with it, a system that would control wrestling for decades.
This right here, this was the secret sauce, the gentleman's agreement. It was more than a rule, it was a pact. These guys literally carved up the country like a pizza, and everyone got their own slice. If you ran shows in Florida, the guy in Georgia would never dare cross the border. This unwritten law was the NWA's real power. It was a cartel where everybody won because there was no competition.
So how do you hold this huge empire together with just a handshake? Well, you do it with one man, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. This guy was a king on the road, a traveling superstar who spent, get this, over 300 days a year defending that title in every corner of the country. He was the one human thread that held this whole giant thing together. And here's where the system gets really, really clever. The formula was perfect. The champ rolls into town, which is a huge deal. He fights the local top guy, and the champion almost always wins. But, and this is the key part, only by the skin of his teeth. So what happens? The local hero looks like he can hang with the best in the world, and the local promoter makes an absolute fortune. It was a formula that just worked every single time.
Now, this system wasn't just making people rich, it was a creative powerhouse. In the late 70s and early 80s, the territories hit this absolute golden age. It was this perfectly balanced ecosystem, a wrestling paradise that was just printing money. And more importantly, it was creating all these different unique styles of wrestling all over the country. So, for example, you could go to the Mid-Atlantic region. There, Jim Crockett Promotions treated wrestling like it was high art. It was all about technical skill and these epic long-term stories. This is where you got the legendary rivalries, like the Nature Boy Ric Flair versus the American Dream Dusty Rhodes. It was basically Shakespeare in a wrestling ring. But at the same time, something totally revolutionary was happening down in Georgia. Thanks to this amazing deal with Ted Turner's new cable superstation WTBS, Georgia Championship Wrestling was suddenly being beamed into homes all across America. All of a sudden, this local promotion had a national audience. And that move, well, it would show off the NWA's power, but it also exposed its biggest weakness.
And then you could drive over to Mid-South, which was the complete opposite. Cowboy Bill Watts ran that territory, and he hated what he called the cartoon stuff. He wanted his wrestling to feel brutally real, like you were watching a back alley brawl. This was the home of tough-as-nails guys like the Junkyard Dog and a young, super arrogant Ted Biazzi. Totally different vibe.
So for 3 decades, this empire seemed untouchable. It was a fortress built on honor and profit. But its downfall wasn't going to come from some outside invader. Nope. It came from within. From a man who grew up inside the system and decided he was going to be the one to burn it all down.
And really, it all comes down to a father and a son. A total clash of generations. Vince McMahon Sr., he was old school, a respected promoter, a man of his word who played by the NWA's rules. His son, Vince Jr., was different. When he bought the company from his dad in 1982, he didn't see a map of friends and partners. He saw a map of places to conquer. He saw a country full of wrestling fans, and he wanted all of them.
This wasn't a friendly competition. It was a war. McMahon's battle plan was brutal. First, he just shattered the gentleman's agreement, running his shows right in his rivals' backyards. Then he used national TV to basically starve them out. But his deadliest weapon? He poached their talent. He went after the biggest stars, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, and he lured them away with big money and promises of global fame. He was ripping the heart out of the territories, one star at a time.
Then came the day that sent a shockwave through the entire industry. July 14th, 1984. It's known forever as Black Saturday. In this just savage corporate move, McMahon secretly bought control of Georgia Championship Wrestling, the most watched wrestling show in the country, just so he could take over their TV time slot. This was a declaration of total war.
Can you even imagine? You turn on your TV on a Saturday, expecting to see your hometown guys, and instead you see the face of the enemy, Vince McMahon, welcoming you to his show. For millions of fans, the wrestling they loved was just gone. The backlash was insane, but the message to all the other promoters was loud and clear: nobody is safe.
So as McMahon's empire is just swallowing everything up, the NWA is on the verge of total collapse. But in their darkest hour, one man stepped up. Jim Crockett Jr., the guy running the Mid-Atlantic Territory. He refused to surrender. He decided he was going to unite what was left of the NWA for one last desperate fight.
And this was it, the final battle for the soul of wrestling. Crockett threw everything he had at McMahon. But you know, he was David and McMahon was Goliath. And this time, Goliath won. The cost of trying to compete with McMahon's money just sent Crockett into a financial death spiral. And by the end of 1988, he was broke, he was bleeding cash, and he sold his company to Ted Turner. The war was over. The empire had officially fallen.
So, an empire built on handshakes was shattered by pure ambition. But why does any of this old history even matter today? Well, to understand the wrestling world as we know it, we have to look at what was lost when the territories died, and what, somehow, managed to survive.
You know, the biggest thing we lost was probably variety. All those different styles, the brawling in Mid-South, the technical wrestling in the Carolinas, it all kind of got blended together into one single national product they called sports entertainment. But here's the crazy irony. What survived was the talent. The territories ended up being the ultimate training ground for the very superstars who would take over the world.
The territories are long gone, yeah, but they're ghosts. Their ghosts still haunt the ring. The legacy of that system is woven into everything we see in modern wrestling, in ways you might not even realize. I mean, just look at this list. This is the NWA's graduating class. These legends weren't made in some corporate performance center. No way. They were forged on the road, wrestling hundreds of nights a year in these smoky little arenas all over the country. Their global success was built on the foundation the NWA gave them.
And in a final pretty fascinating twist, the NWA name itself is still around. In 2017, it was bought by the musician Billy Corgan. And while it's nowhere near the powerhouse it used to be, it kind of exists today as this living tribute to that once great empire.
So, all of this leaves us with the one big question that wrestling fans still argue about constantly. Was Vince McMahon's takeover just progress, a necessary evolution that took wrestling from a regional hobby to a global powerhouse? Or was it an act of destruction that killed a really rich, diverse culture just for the sake of dominating the market?
You know, there's no easy answer to that. But one thing is absolutely for sure. The fall of the NWA was a seismic event. It completely changed wrestling forever. It was the end of an empire built on a handshake and the beginning of a new one built on pure, uncut ambition.